Hello and welcome to the Insights Festival show. I'm delighted to be presenting this next segment, which is all about building an inclusive world and looking how the insights community and the insights sector can play a role in fostering an inclusive global society where no one is left behind. To help me with this journey, I've brought in a few guests who are going to be helping me to talk a little bit about the issues around anti-racism, the issues around diversity, the issues around inclusivity, as it is seen from the perspective, a global perspective, both from a North American perspective, as well as a European and rest of the world perspective as well. To help me with this, I've brought four guests, as I mentioned: Whitney, Juliana, Nikki, and Simon, who are going to be talking together with me about this topic and how we can actually change the world in a better way. So I would like to just introduce and welcome to the show Simon, Nikki, Whitney, and Juliana. Whitney, welcome to the show. And Whitney, perhaps you could tell the rest of the people in attendance who you are and where you're coming from.
Hi, I'm Whitney Dunlap Fowler. I currently reside in New York City. Well, I live in New Jersey, outside of New York City. I am the owner of Touch of What Creative and founder of Insights in Color.
Whitney, a huge warm welcome to the show. My next guest is Juliana. Welcome. Juliana, could you tell us where you're hailing from and what you'll be bringing to the show?
Yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Juliana. I'm based in Brussels, Belgium. I work for the European Network Against Racism as a senior advocacy officer, but originally I'm from Brazil. So I'm trying to bring both the South and the North perspective to the discussion.
I'm really looking forward to that introduction. Thank you, Juliana, and welcome to the show. And of course, one of the leading lights of the Insights community, Simon Chadwick, who for some doesn't need an introduction, but of course we are broadcasting this particular show outside of our usual circles. So Simon, welcome to the show. And can you introduce yourself and tell us where you're hailing from?
Thank you, Kim. I come to you from Raleigh, North Carolina, and I am the editor-in-chief of Research World, as well as managing partner of a consulting company called Cambio. I've been writing about racism and indeed sexism in the insights industry for some time now, and it's a subject very close to my heart.
Thank you, Simon. Welcome to the show. And last but certainly not least, I'm really pleased to be able to welcome one member of the SMR Council, Nikki, who's also in charge of diversity issues and initiatives within the SMR Council. Nikki, welcome to the show, and perhaps you can also introduce yourself and tell us where you're hailing from.
Thanks, Kim. I am joining today from Paris by way of New Hampshire. So started out in New Hampshire, grew up in the States, and happened to be based in Paris for the last decade. And that's right. So SMR Council member, also founded MindSpark Research International, and been working with Kim and other people on the SMR Council team to talk about issues exactly like this.
Welcome to all of you. So I hope the audience hears that there's a lot of expertise around the table, and that we're going to have a really interesting journey to talk a little bit about kind of the impact of the Black Lives Movement, kind of both today and in the future in the United States. We also want to talk a little bit about the impact of the movement in terms of consumer expectations, in terms of the markets, in terms of society, and what we can expect from that. And of course, we have the advantage of talking to a lot of insights makers and insight professionals who have access to really cool information with regards to that. And last but not least, we want to talk a little bit about the role that the research community can play as a supporter of a more inclusive world. So hopefully we can also get into that. But we have only 45 minutes, so let's get straight into the topic. I want to ask each and every one of the panelists kind of to give us your personal thoughts and also kind of your take in terms of the events that have been unfolding recently in the United States, which of course are cascading around the world and creating much more impact than we perhaps could have anticipated. I want to first give the floor to Whitney to perhaps give her perspective in terms of what's been happening in the United States and kind of how you see the evolution of this particular topic in the next few weeks or months from your perspective as a researcher and as an activist. Whitney?
Yeah, I don't know that I can predict the future of the Black Lives Matter movement. Things are quite chaotic here in America. We never know what's happening from day to day. And the fact that the momentum is still here is actually quite a shock for most Black consumers who are used to, statements being stated and then kind of disappearing the next day or week, if you will. So I think I probably echo a lot of sentiments from other Black consumers who live in America that the outrage is not necessarily new. We've felt that for years. Maybe the outrage from other groups feels a bit newer for them. But Black and Brown consumers have always known the history and the state of things in this country. I think what is new is the sustained prevalence of it, the sustained activism around it for those who are participating, and the amount of change that has kind of occurred in fields and in industries that have historically never been open or not open, but never seemed to welcome Black and Brown people in them. It wasn't explicitly stated. We just kind of know, NASCAR is not for us, kind of a thing. So, in institutions like that create Black Lives Matter statements, it feels weird and it's a bit overwhelming to see that happen. But then you kind of move from shock to, well, are they really going to keep their promises? So.
Thanks, Whitney. I want to also bring Juliana in because, of course, what was interesting to see is that clearly this was an issue there, and there are clearly issues which are very specific to the United States, which of course made the Black Lives Matter even more perhaps explosive in terms of what it actually meant, and that people were physically losing their lives. Do you feel that in Europe there was of course an echo, but it tended to be quite a judgmental echo to say, this happens in the US but not in Europe? So I'd be really interested to hear from you as well, Juliana, kind of what is your take in terms of what's happened in the United States, the echo that it's experienced in the rest of the world, and kind of what ENAR's take on all of this, ENAR being the European Network Against Racism?
Yeah, I think the 2020 was a year of changes. There are many new normals, and I think one of the new normal is a platform of reflection, what happened after George Floyd's murder. So I think in Europe, of course, it seems from our perspective, one person of color, that suddenly Europeans, they realize that racism exists. And it's kind of interesting to see also the institutional response to that, because we never have had such an opportunity to create an anti-racist agenda as we have now. For the first time in history, we're going to have a European plan to address racism as a policy program. So I think it's very interesting that there were some positive advancements. What I think is different, that resonated different in Europe, is that the Black Lives Matter movement brought to the attention the question of structural racism. I don't know if you know, but in Europe, the framework, the legal framework and the policy framework does not tackle structural or institutional racism. We still remain in the level of the individual. So it was really a positive shift and opportunity to advance more requests and concerns, and what do we do around examples of structural institutional racism, such as police brutality, which is also a reality in Europe. During the COVID, there were many, many murders of people of color, people of African descent. They were also one of the most criminalized, but also one of the most affected by police violence and police control during the pandemic. So, and this also was opportunity to have a positive coverage of the issues related to racism, because in Europe before George Floyd, everything that was related to racism was negatively portrayed. And now there is a shift in the way the media is also covering. And there is not only they are covering positively, but they are covering massively. Every day you have something in the papers around racism and how Black Lives Matter. So I think it brought a very important shift in the way we can talk about racism without being in a taboo anymore. But we are still living in a world where many minds are colonized. So I think the problem now will be how we're going to address the question of the societal change. But let's see how the new policies will be developed. Let's see how the new plans will be implemented. But we remain positive and to see that there is a window of opportunity to growth for us is really welcoming.
Thanks, Juliana. And Simon, I want to bring you in onto the debate because I know that, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, you've written about this topic. You've been trying to get the rest of the community also involved in a much greater way. I'd be interested to hear kind of your thoughts as well from your perspective. And of course, you might not be a personal caller, but I know that you've been very passionate about these issues.
Indeed, and thank you, Kim. But I think one of the things that this whole situation, the COVID, the politics in the US, and now George Floyd has done is to kind of rip away a curtain. Racism isn't just attitude and behavior by one individual or a group of individuals to another. It is systematic, it is institutional within the organization of society, and it has been in this country since 1619, when the first slave arrived. I wrote a book last year called For the People, in which I actually laid out for people just exactly how the history of African Americans still plays into their modern day lives, particularly in terms of net income, net wealth, the way in which they're treated, the fact that, if you're a young African male and you go down the wrong street at the wrong time, it can be fatal. All of these things were there originally, and they've been there for a long time, despite the steps forward that have been made in the past. What this era has done is to absolutely rip away that curtain. And I think, Whitney was talking about some of the surprise that Black Lives Matter has persisted as long as it has, and the protests have persisted as long as they have. But I think there's also, in addition to that, a change, a shift that is remarkable, which is if you look at the polls from about a year ago, in which whites were asked, do you think there's institutional racism? Do you think blacks are treated less fairly by the police, for example, than whites? You would have found a majority saying, no, there isn't. It was perhaps 55, 60% of whites saying, no, there is not institutional racism. Today, it is 65, 70% saying, yes, there is. Now, to Whitney's point, we have to see how long that lasts. But currently, with the current administration essentially using race as a weapon in the election, my suspicion is that this will persist longer. And it may well be that we will see permanent or semi-permanent shifts in opinion, and therefore also in action. I hope so, at least.
Thank you, Simon. And Nikki, of course, I'd be really interested because you're also a person who is in two worlds, in two different continents, so two very different perspectives on the topic of race. Kind of what is your take in terms of what's happened in the unfolding events, and also kind of how do you see the situation evolving?
I would actually say that I'm in three worlds because I have the kind of American background. I am living, in France, in a European country, but I'm also very deeply involved with what's happening in the UK. And there's a lot of stuff unfolding in the UK now as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement as well. And as someone who grew up in New England, where it is a predominantly white part of the country, and it's filled with people who think that they're open-minded until they are confronted with an idea that makes them uncomfortable, France seems to be very much on par with that way of thinking. So as Juliana mentioned, One of the things that's interesting about France, as many people know, is that French people love to protest and they love to march and they love to, make big statements about how they feel. So there have been marches and protests in support of Black Lives Matter here. But then shortly after that, there were actually marches and protests against police brutality, because in fact, racism similar to what is happening in America does exist very strongly in France. I would say it's probably one of the most racially violent and racially segregated countries in all of Western Europe, particularly because most people in France tend to refuse to see it as racism, and they see it as cultural differences. So they'll say things about, oh, I'm not racist, I just have an issue with Northern Africans. And they are in a place where it's very difficult for them to understand that that sort of system of beliefs and their perpetuation of it is in fact contributing to ongoing racism. And then in terms of the third aspect of my life, which is my deep involvement with UK culture as well, only now are people starting to have more honest conversations about colonialism. So it used to just be that if you were an English person, you would just say, well, I'm from England, and go on with your life. And now there's a lot of, well, I'm from England, but I have Irish roots, and there's a lot of conflict and history there as well, but also realizing the effect that that England has had globally in terms of their colonization and the impact that effort has had for one country to kind of dominate, and all of the trickle-down effects that come into play. There's so much that exists in the world in terms of structure and systematic policies that have been on the books for centuries and centuries, and they were literally designed to promote colonialism and promote colonists and to subdue local and indigenous people. So it's only just now that people in the UK are starting to become aware of their own role in what is coming out in America. They used to just be able to say, well, that's happening over there, that has nothing to do with us. And now they're starting to say, well, actually, okay, so I see that, okay, it was the Americans who did it, but who were the Americans, right? They came over from our country, and a lot of the policies that they put into place were our ideas. So yeah, I think there's some thinking starting to happen, but again, always more slowly than we would like it to see, and hopefully it does persist, and hopefully these conversations continue to happen.
Thank you all of you for these contributions. I want to kind of build on what Juliana was saying, that there is an opportunity here, and one of the questions which I know for me really struck me at the beginning of the situation of the explosion of these issues was, to what extent are we facing once again a very social media driven event, so that this is actually going to be just a hashtag event. We're going to be very passionate about it for a week, 2 weeks, and then it will go away. I'd be curious to hear from all of you if you feel that actually now we have hit a watershed moment, that maybe this is actually an opportunity to elevate this topic and to actually create meaningful change, whether it is in the political discourse, in the upcoming US elections, perhaps. I'd just be really curious to hear from you, whether you think this is really there has been a fundamental shift in the discourse. Whitney, I know we talked a little bit about that kind of briefly into the session. Do you think this is going to be changing things in the US, or do you think actually, no, unfortunately, the chances are that this is just a hashtag movement?
I'm just not an optimistic person. I've been Black all my life, so what's happening now is nice. I don't think it's beneficial to be Black and assume that change is happening. It's more beneficial to be Black and be grateful when and if it does. So, we can speak nicely about it and say, oh, this is different. But Americans in the world like to have convenient amnesia a lot of the times. And I predict that's probably what's going to happen on, when we look back at this time period of, oh, it wasn't that bad. So, I can't speak to that, if this will be a watershed moment. I think that there's some interesting things happening and some interesting conversations happening, and we'll just have to see, where it goes. I think the thing that I'm looking for most is that Black and Brown consumers aren't necessarily carrying the weight of that change. We're seeing a lot of people, newly hired and being in these D&I roles in these organizations that have been racist pretty much all of their lives. And now that they see an opportunity because it's trending, they want to hire a Black, head of something to head these spaces for them. I think it's imperative that brands see Black and brown figures as more than just DE&I strategists. We are talented in many ways. We can do regular mainstream talent acquisition work, strategies, and everything like that. And so it's great for us to be in places where we can try to affect change in these organizations and systems, assuming that they listen to us, but that's literally like 5% of the problem. So I don't really have anything optimistic to say, except to say, let's wait and see. Yeah.
Okay. I want to bring Simon on this because you were mentioning that at least in the polls, there's a bit of shift, at least in terms of people recognizing that systemic racism might actually be a reality. Do you see in other polls perhaps things which indicate whether Whitney's concerns might actually be unfortunately the reality, or do you see that actually there has indeed been a shift or not in terms of what you're able to have access to?
The shift is still there, but it's waning somewhat. So I think Whitney's right. There's always going to be amnesia, as she put it, or a kind of feeling of, oh well, we dealt with that, now we can move on. But I do think that really what we, I think what she was saying about D&I, which is where a lot of companies are going right now, is kind of, oh yeah, let's put in a D&I function and let's get a Black person in there or a brown person in there. It's so inauthentic. It really is. I mean, if you're going to create a role just so that you can have a Black face on your homepage or our team page, I mean, it just stands out a mile. It's ridiculous. And it's even more ridiculous when you look at surveys and studies by Gallup and by McKinsey and people like that show that a racially diverse executive team actually produces on average 20 to 25% better performance than one that isn't racially diverse. That's what incenses me. It's that there's such this blindness to the fact that these people actually are there to contribute to society, not just be a token. And so what I'm looking for and what I'm keeping an eye out for is very much what actions are being taken and how those actions are being communicated. That the social media hashtag will continue on, and probably that's a good thing. But it's not a good thing if it's just something for corporations to hang their hat on and go, woo, look at us, aren't we great? That's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly from a personal perspective, it always was a big concern of mine that indeed, when we saw the outpouring of all these brands that suddenly became, allies of the Black Lives Matter, even though if you look at their websites, they never employ, for example, just having, a Black model to actually represent their brands, those types of things which are very basic, but they say so much about a company and an organization. Nikki, I just want to bring you in as well from your perspective in the three worlds, but also from the research that you undertake day in and day out. Is that also are these what Whitney and what Simon have said kind of finding echoes as well in your line of work?
Yeah, I would say absolutely yes. I mean, the thing is that I don't think we should celebrate change until it has arrived. And right now, all we're doing is talking about change that hasn't arrived yet. And I think that's the issue. And, hiring, as Simon was saying, token people to fill roles, some people might say, oh, well, that's a step in the right direction. But truthfully, it's not, because what's a step in the right direction is ownership of the racism that caused you to need to hire someone in the first place. And so, there's a lot of brands out there and a lot of companies that are trying really hard to insert some diversity into their board of directors or into, their advisory team. And I think that is great. But the issue is you can't be looking at things like, oh, we need to combat XYZ issue in order to address things that happen as a result of someone's skin color. No, we need to address XYZ issue because people are racist. So we need to stop making this about the people of color and start making it about the people who are quote unquote not of color, who are the ones causing the problems. So we need to stop pushing this on how can we fill roles, how can we tick boxes, how can we dot I's and cross T's with people of color, when what we really need to do is we need to start internally. You know, as far as I'm concerned, a brand can do a much better job maintaining an all-white advisory board if they thoroughly go through every single policy that they have and work on eradicating racism that is inherently built into the structure of their organization. Because by doing that, then they will start bringing people of color into their businesses in more meaningful ways. And I think the issue right now is that everybody's just worried about value signaling. Everybody's like, I'm an ally, I'm an ally. But, you know, in order to be an ally, you need to own the things that you were doing that were not or are currently doing that are not actually allies to the people that are, you know, facing all of this discrimination.
Juliana, you represent a year. Go ahead, Simon.
Sorry to interrupt. I think Nikki's got a really good point here, but I think also it's an examination not just of racism, but of discrimination in all its forms that runs through organizations, whether that be based on race or gender or, you know, sexual orientation. You know, it's otherism, it's discrimination on all fronts. And until we kind of strike that out of the system and out of our, you know, what we're talking about, we're not going to be able to deal with these problems.
Indeed. I mean, Juliana, you're representing a European network of the frontline activists who are dealing with these issues day in and day out and really trying to push the agenda across all of Europe. I mean, kind of what you've heard from Simon, Nikki, and Whitney, is that something, do you find echo in terms of the work that you're doing? Are there things which your network has been recommending for years that you would like to finally start seeing being implemented?
Yes, definitely. And I hear and I echo what second what Whitney said, like it's important that we are seen as women being, that we are not seen as commodities. And that's what's the question of the media and the question of the politicians and the questions of the brand, the commercial aspect, is that we are not seen as and valued as persons. We are valued as a product of society. And I think for us, especially in terms of diversity, and that's why we have launched 2 years ago a campaign called Brussels So White. You know that in Brussels, we have the headquarters of the European Union, we have the headquarters of NATO, we have the office of the UN, and most of these people doing policy making and decision making here in Europe, they are based in Brussels, and most of them are white male officials or white male representatives. So of course we have been pushing more and more for diversity, but not any kind of diversity. What we want is really diversity that matters, where people don't feel they are just there to be tokenized, but also they are listening to. And they also that should create safe space for these people, because creating diversity without creating safe space, what you see is just a low level of retention of these professionals in their environments where they work. So what we're trying to do is really to bring more awareness that like it's not diversity in quantitative terms, is diversity, understanding the intersections and the desires and the needs of the people. And we have to accommodate the environment that we create towards these needs, not making sure that they accommodate to the white standards, to the European standards, white privilege standards. And I agree, we are not just facing here a question of race, we are talking about all systems of oppression. We are talking about patriarchy, capitalism, imperialism, heteronormative. We are talking about everything, but the issue now is that the state of emergency requires a racial lens, require a racial approach. So of course, we are not creating any hierarchy of privilege or a hierarchy of rights, but the state of emergency here is race. That's why when I hear Nikki said, I really understand what she said, like this need or this approach of Europeans trying to depoliticize the debate on race, because everything should go about neutrality, should be about human rights as a human as race. We are all the same race. So we are just trying to put the things under the rug. So we need to bring back race to the core of discussions, because otherwise we're just gonna walk in cycles. And the media for that is great, but the media is not everything. The media is not a bullet solution. You need environments, you need ecosystems that can make this media message pass across all structures of society. So if in one hand I see a positive change, in another way, I'm still waiting to applaud, because I'm sure that what is coming comes also with some kind of bargain.
Thanks,
Juliana,
I was going to give the floor indeed to you, Whitney, because I know that we have actually been talking a bit about this, and I wanted to see if you could also bring in the topic that we were talking a bit about how global brands and global businesses are indeed struggling to reflect and to react to what is actually very specific to the US. So I just wanted to add that and say, please expand on what Juliana has said.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I'm actually really glad that, we're saying that the state of the emergency is race. I find that, when diversity was kind of first being brought to light, everyone wanted to lean on this gender diversity because it's easy, right? It's less complicated. A lot of the companies I've been a part of are like, oh, we're diverse. We've got people from Finland and Ireland, and we've got this amount of women, and it's kind of like, okay, well, as a Black person, it's nice to know that you have people from different places of the globe, but let's talk about the brown and Black people that you don't have. I find that global brands companies tend to want to pick out the nice parts of diversity, things that, they can feel that they can easily solve. And I've got to be honest, this idea of easily solving a problem, it's a very white privilege sentiment. And I think this is why people are really tired of having this conversation. White people are used to throwing money at something and it solves the issue, right? Like, oh, let's just throw money at it. Like, we're all on board. It's here. The issue's done. It's concluded. You know what I mean? Racism, discrimination, all of these structures took hundreds of years to develop, implement, and sustain. That's not how this is going to be solved. It's just not. It's not an overnight kind of solution, So when we think about global brands and how they like to tackle these issues, it's a very much of a cherry picking selection of what feels easy, what can I just dip my toe into so that my values, my mission look really nice on the outside. I like to call them these kumbaya approaches. We believe in equity for all. When, let's be honest, there are certain groups across this world that experience the harshest parts of racial discrimination. And you can't say we're all for women and not dive into the intersectionality aspects of that and what it looks like for white women versus Latinx women or Hispanic women or Asian women and Black women. It's just not possible, So when I know global brands get it wrong, it's because they like to look at the United States as a trends, mecca, if you will. They like to put their whole colonist lens on it and say, right, what's digestible for my audience? What's digestible for my stakeholders and my shareholders? And let's do that, because that's going to make our company look like we care a little bit, but it's not actually enacting any change. That's how you kind of get the Kendall Jenner Pepsi moments of the world, if you will. You know what I mean? So as an African American, we know that it's fake. Okay, we already can see that. We can see global companies saying, oh, we want to stand for these things. We know that it's inauthentic. We know that it's trying to get our dollars without them actually caring about our lives. We're not that ignorant. You know what I mean? So global brands need to do better. And they need to think that they need to know that our dollars and our pockets are not guaranteed. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Nikki, do you want to react on this?
Yes. I would say, just building off of that, that I think one of the biggest problems is that global brands do tend to be hyper US centric. I think that's really problematic. I agree with everything everyone's been saying, that, you know, the emergency is on race right now, but I think that it's really difficult for a lot of companies to wrap their head around how important race is when they're looking at the, you know, the historical country that is the United States. I mean, they've successfully been racist and oppressed people for hundreds of years. Whereas when I work with the brands who actually, you know, explore and do things outside of US boundaries and start to think to themselves, okay, well, maybe the US consumer is the one that we're going to be getting from now. Getting money from today, but who are we going to be getting money from tomorrow? And they start thinking about how GDPR is changing, not GDPR, sorry, GDP is changing, and they're thinking about accessibility, access to the internet is changing, access to technology is changing, access to jobs is changing. So there's going to be a shift in wealth distribution in the world, and the brands who recognize that it's actually going to be people of color who are going to be running this world and should be running this world, and in some case, in some small parts of the world, actually, you know, that's what a standard, you know, just making a small aside and talking about research specifically, a lot of people push back against the idea of a representative sample. I've actually heard in the last couple of weeks a couple of people saying, oh, well, we really need to make sure it's representative. We don't want to have too many Black people and too many people of color. And I'm just thinking, when we get to that point, you know, that's that's a good problem to have. We are not anywhere near the point in time when we have to worry about having too many people of color's voices included in what we do. So I do think that most global brands are looking at, you know, the spending power of Americans, and they're not thinking about the spending power that's going to come from the rest of the world as things continue to evolve, especially things that have been sped up by COVID, because now people have a lot more access to a lot more things than they did before in terms of internet and jobs and ability to upskill and ability to get, you know, a CV together and all this kind of stuff. And eventually it's going to be impossible to ignore the racist and oppressive behaviors and acts that are happening in the United States, because the rest of the world is going to catch up and say, you know, hey, actually, you guys are the minority. So it's time that you start, you know, rebalancing the power distribution a little bit more accurately.
Thanks, Nikki. And that indeed creates a little opening to talk a little bit about the role of research and what it can do to help improve and create a more inclusive society and inclusive world as well. I mean, Simon, you've penned also, again, a lot of papers on this particular topic, on the role that the research community should play. I'd be curious to hear from you. Do you think research is doing enough? If we've heard what Nikki's just said, perhaps there's also some work to be done within the research community.
Oh, the research community is nowhere near doing enough. You know, Nikki just said she's starting to hear we mustn't have too many Blacks in the sample. I've heard the same thing. And you know, I think this whole issue, if we look at the issue of representativity in sample, it's a function of pure damn laziness, intellectual and human laziness. That, oh, well, they're so difficult to reach, they're hard to reach. We don't have the budget for that, we don't have the time for that. Just try and get it as right as you can. Or even worse, you know, hey, we had a Black person in that group. Oh, good, you had one token Black person, well done. You know, it is laziness. There are the methods and the modes that are out there right now that will enable you to get to a representative sample, not only of, you know, African Americans, but also Latin Americans, Spanish-speaking Latin Americans, the elderly, all the people that are hard to reach. And, you know, we have to do a heck of a lot better. And I think we have to actually turn the spotlight on ourselves. On the other side of the equation, it is also true, I think, that we have a massive underrepresentation of Black and brown people in the industry. And, the usual response to that is, well, they just don't, this isn't an industry that they appears to be attractive to them. They aren't out there. So we would hire them if they were out there. Well, whose responsibility is that? Whose responsibility is it that we haven't gone in America, for example, into the historically Black colleges and promoted research, promoted the insights profession as a really good profession for them to pursue? Who hasn't actually gone out to look at this? And let's not forget today, and this really worries me, the use of algorithms in human resource recruitment, which incorporate bias right within them. And we've seen examples recently of companies where Black people were literally thrown out because of the inherent bias in algorithms. So, if I can just make a plug here to HR around the world, get off your asses and stop trusting computers and do your jobs. But that being said, I think there's a lot that this industry can do, and we've got to avoid the traps that Whitney was also talking about, which was, we can talk about it until we're blue in the face, but we've got to see action. And that's why I'm really pleased to see things like CORE coming up. And I'm really pleased to see, things like the Insights Association and LATAM are really paying attention here and acting. And now we've got to get the brands to act as well, and the suppliers.
So some viewers might not know what actually CORE means. So I just want to give maybe Whitney a chance to talk a little bit about the work that she's undertaking within the research community, but also just to react to that, because I know that we also were talking a lot about, what the research community is or isn't doing and what it could actually be doing more of to be a true ally to this cause.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, that's for me. Yes, Kim?
Yeah.
So I founded Insights in Color probably a couple years ago when I was with Kantar Added Value. It was definitely meant to be a bit of a recruitment pipeline for the diversity that we did not see in our organization and to bring people of color together on the floor. I, kind of left that with Kantar, went to a different organization after that, started Touch of Wit Creative in the fall of 2019, and after the death of George Floyd, saw that that there was a deeper need arising for Black and Brown researchers. That kind of gave me the idea to bring Insights in Color back. I honestly just wanted to create a way for us to find each other, because in most of my years in this industry, I've been in this industry for 10 years, I had never set aside or worked with another Black or Brown researcher, at least not for an extended amount of time, or who was not a freelancer. So I wanted to create a networking gallery wall, something with the future generation of researchers in mind. We tend to be all visual anyways, but quickly found that there was a larger need beyond just a networking gallery wall. And so Insights in Color has now been built to keep in mind future generations of Black and Brown researchers, create the resources necessary for those audiences. And more than anything, we are built on a platform of disruption. I'm not really here for the corporate nice associations and the Band-Aid solutions. We want to talk about how the industry was built on colonialist ideas, built for white men and built by white men, and has not been able to change with the times, with the way that we do our methods, with the way that we talk to consumers, with the way we do our sample panels and things like that. So it's really our job to deconstruct the industry from the inside out, create the knowledge and the tools around how things are inherently biased, and more importantly, create those educational pipelines to what Simon said, really build that pipeline back to other generations. I can't tell you how many researchers I've spoken to, both, Black, brown, and white, who have said they kind of found themselves in this space. And if a white researcher has kind of found themselves into this space, it's much more rare for a Black or brown researcher to find themselves in this space. And there's so many things that are so beneficial for us to know. And it's really important for us to be architects of our own stories. And we don't even know that we have the power to do that or the ability to do that, because none of us are aware of what the research industry does or who we are. So Insights and Color is really built to change that dynamic, to challenge companies, to empower BIPOC researchers who are in the field, to create the through line of connectivity, because so many of us leave the industry after we get past a certain level of experience or expertise, and create a more connected space for Black and Brown researchers. And ideally build this pipeline up over the next, it's going to take a while, 3 to 5 years, if you will, by reaching back to schools and institutions.
Thanks, Whitney. It sounds like such a huge piece of work, but such a crucial piece of work to get this right. I just want to bring Juliana in as well on this, because I'd be curious, kind of from your perspective. Has the research community been helpful to the work that you do? Are we doing enough to make sense of the experience of Blacks? Whether it be in Europe, whether it be in the US, whether it be the rest of the world. As a frontline activist, have you found your relationship with the research community to be as good as you wish it to be?
Yeah, but I think in Europe, the question, it's a little bit more complicated than that. We don't have disaggregated data based on race, religion, ethnicity, and religion in Europe. Also not based on migrant background. So we are not able to really have the good evidence, the correct data, because we have to, as activists, conduct research I don't directly come across the focus group to have this kind of information. So it goes beyond the level of just cooperative research. It also how data will be analyzed and how data will be disaggregated. So here we are talking about really the first steps in terms of how can we map racism and how can we map inequalities? And here you have to count then with a group of researchers, a group of stakeholders, a group of serious frontline activists that understand the need to disaggregate data as much as we can to bring to the core the evidence that you need. Because if you're invisible, you don't exist. So that's how we are, where we, today, as you know, is where we really struggle, because we try to make our own data. We create a department only for research, because we want to be an advocacy-based organization, but also based on evidence. So we need these statistics, we need this data to make sure that our agenda will be heard. So for us, the cooperation with researchers is really important, because there is also another level of raising awareness on racism. It's not only on the institutional level, but also on the academic level. How can you make data be disaggregated, data be more visible for Black people, to raise awareness on the question of racism? So this is one thing. I would like to also come to 2 other points that were mentioned, one by Simon, and I could not agree more, that technology is not neutral. Data discriminates. INAR has launched a report last year on hardwiring. So how the police brutality and police violence are sorry, there is a cat and a child. They are exacerbated by the algorithms in the reality. So how police brutality and racial profiling, they are just being amplified and magnified by the use of data. And nobody's talking about it. So it's really important that we take a look also on everyday life, not only in employment, but also in mobility, how people are much more profiled because of artificial intelligence. Another question that I'd like to come is about the branding, the D&I, the companies, the market. Well, I think we're forgetting an important point here, is because the system in which we operate is based on more than enslavement of people. So we need also to invest in Black money. We need also to invest in Black industry. So it's not only about create a D&I department, it's about having a Black supplier, it's having an IT Black company providing support. It's really create equity programs that makes sure that these other chains of suppliers, these other chain of financement can be empowered, because money is power. So when you give more power to Black people, they're gonna be much more stronger to advance the question of racism. And of course, we are also then removing the systemic barriers and removing the colonial struggles of race. So I would like really to address the question of black money, because it's not only talking about from the perspective of the white companies that always gain a lot of money and a lot of privilege throughout the years, but also let's invest on black investments. Let's make equity programs for them, because otherwise we are gonna talk about different modern phases of slavery.
Nikki, I want to bring you in because, I mean, of course, you're a member of the ASMR Council, which is the global voice for the data research and insights community. And I think a lot of the questions a lot of the statements which were raised certainly put into question and very sharp focus what role could a trade and a professional association like ASMR, but also around the world, like the Insights Association, the MRS in the UK, and other associations around the world, what role can they play to mobilize essentially the ecosystem in support of what Juliana has been saying? I'd be really curious to hear what your thoughts are on this matter.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a great question and not an easy one to answer. I think there's a couple of things that come to mind for me when it comes to the role of an association. And one would be that we cannot rely on Black people and people of color to fix this problem. And so one of the things that I see happening a lot is we'll say, let's go out and ask someone, you know, what should we be doing? How should we fix this? When it's sort of like, you know, asking, I don't know, it's an inappropriate question. It's an inappropriate series of questions. And so I think one of the major roles that associations can play is to come up with some solutions for this that, you know, different organizations, different local associations can enact, different agencies can enact on their own. The other thing too is that, you know, kind of as we've been saying, and to touch on Juliana's point as well, you know, being an ally when you're not a person of color is about uplifting the voices that are being oppressed. And I think that's another important role. And so, you know, one thing that associations can do is to highlight who are the, let's use research agencies, for example, who are the Black-owned research agencies in your market, who are the Black-owned research suppliers, you know, who has done a really good job of cultivating a Black panel, or a panel that has people of color, or, you know, people of different physical and visual disabilities, and all of those kinds of things. But, you know, to really kind of put emphasis on those companies that are doing it well, and to try and inject some money back into those organizations that need it in order to no longer be oppressed. I mean, it isn't supposed to be about handouts and charity. It's really about enabling people to take care of themselves and to operate their businesses accordingly, and to be an equal player on the business landscape, which at the moment is not the case. So that's just two, you know, quick things. I think there's probably more ideas to be had, but I'm sure there are other voices that you want to include on the question.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the time is quickly running out. So I just want to give a final opportunity to each of our speakers to just share, you know, if there's one thing that you would want kind of, you know, brand leaders or the research ecosystem to take away from your presentation today, from your time, what would be that one thing that you would want them to take away before we close the session up? Whitney, would you like to start us off?
Sure. I just want to say that I think there are a lot of interesting organizations and associations kind of popping up to fix this, especially specifically in the research industry. And, you know, I never want to hear that there's too many. This is a really big issue. And I think to fix something this large, this systemic, it takes a lot of different hands, a lot of different touch points, a lot of different organizations to get it right. So, you know, I'm fine with everyone popping up. I don't think that we should, you know, see each other as in conflict, but as all trying to achieve one singular goal of changing this industry for the better. So I'm hoping that, you know, we all kind of figure out ways to do so and really move the needle in how we do research, who occupies this space, and what it's going to look like in the next 3 to 5 years, for sure.
Thanks, Whitney. Juliana, from your perspective, you've given us a lot of food for thought.
Oh, yes. And I'm sorry for that, but someone has to do it. But I'd like to see, probably from the research world, more advocacy to disaggregate data in Europe. We are a little bit alone in this front. I think we need more pressure. We need more conversations. We need more advocacy and lobby towards the institutions and towards the academic world as well, because they can already start the some pilot initiatives within the academic world as well, or the research centers themselves. But would like to see is more really how we can make the data more visible about racism in Europe, and not only individual racism, but structural institutional racism, because this is the area where we have, of course, zero evidence. So we need your support to map out structural and institutional inequalities.
Simon, what do you think? Have you heard, what do you think of the call for assistance from Juliana?
Well, yeah, I can imagine the frustration that Juliana feels not having disaggregated data, but I think I was on a panel similar to this last week, and there was a lady from ESPN who was talking about how they really made a deep dive into what sports meant for their African American viewers and African American fans, as opposed to other types or other races of fans, and how they went very, very deep into understanding that, and realized only recently that they had to do that. I think what that showed to me was that so many brands have to really get to understand the narrative of being African American, and I'm just looking at the US here, but it's applicable also all around the world. You know, Whitney said, you said earlier in the show, you know, that people don't really know what it's like, you know, to be in. You said I've been in a brown skin for quite some time now. You know, and people don't know what it's like. Brands don't know what it's like. What is the narrative? Actually use your insights function to really start to try and build an understanding of lives, not only Black lives, but brown lives, Asian lives, whatever it may be. But just use this amazing thing that we have in insights, and let's actually use it to gain understanding, and from understanding, action.
Thanks, Simon. And Nikki, the last but certainly not least, what is your final remarks?
I guess I would say, you know, this is not a comment to alleviate brands of any of the pressure that they should rightfully be under to, you know, right the ships that they are on. But I would say that as a research supplier, I think that we also need to take responsibility. I think it's really easy for us to point the finger and say, well, this brand isn't doing the foundational work with the Black community, and therefore they're doing, you know, research that's irrelevant. Yeah, that's true. But what did you say when they called you and asked you to fill the room with 20 white people? Did you push back? Did you say, are we getting a representative voice? And I am definitely guilty of this for sure. And you know, the key is to become more self-aware, to recognize that you're doing these things, to own that you're doing these things, and to make progress and to do better. And I think a lot of our clients, a lot of the brands that we do work for rely on us to be the experts and to say to them, to call them out for the inequality in the research that they're doing. You know, I would like to say that I don't think any racism is 100% accidental, but there could be, you know, some cases like, you know, recruiting for focus groups where they hadn't thought about, you know, putting the quotas in that are actually reflective. So you as a researcher can help them correct that. So pay attention to those things, pay attention to where there are voices that can be elevated, and take responsibility and use that power. That is a form of power. It is a form of privilege. You as a researcher are privileged and powerful and have the chance to say, let's get some other voices in this room and make sure that the brand therefore becomes more open to hearing the voices that they haven't been hearing up until that point.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Simon, Juliana. Thank you so much for your contributions. We touched the
take responsibility and use that power. That is a form of power. It is a form of privilege. You as a researcher are privileged and powerful and have the chance to say, let's get some other voices in this room and make sure that the brand therefore becomes more open to hearing the voices that they haven't been hearing up until that point.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Simon and Juliana. Thank you so much for your contributions. We touched the surface on so many topics that I wish we had more time to unpick and dive deeper into, but unfortunately, our time is restricted and there's so many things to discover and explore. But I think our panelists did such a fantastic job of explaining to us the complexity and the multifacetedness of this issue, but also the key role that the insights community can play, both in terms of illuminating how big this problem is, how to solve it, and also how to create some very concrete actions that can actually help to alleviate these issues and to reverse hundreds of years of injustice. So I just want to thank the panelists so much for your time. I also want to extend a huge word of thanks to NetQuest, who's our fringe partner, who's made this session possible. And for those of you who are interested in having more insights, be aware that the Insights Festival is taking place from the 14th to the 17th of September. You can still register and join and participate in many of the sessions which are uncovering all of these kinds of insights. So if you're interested in this, come to the SMO.org website and register to get an access to all the content. It's really great. It's really fantastic. It's a wonderful festival. And I just thank you very much for your attention and hope you found this session really enlightening. Panelists, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining the show and see you again soon. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Insights Festival 2020 show. It's wonderful to be here talking to you today. I've brought in a very special guest to talk a little bit about iSquare, and that's Jeff Bender, who is the Chief Revenue Officer for iSquare. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kim. Good to be here.
So Jeff, for those who aren't familiar with iSquare, a lot of us in the Insights community might have seen your company's name more and more, but could you tell us a little bit about what iSquare is all about?
Certainly, my pleasure. Company was founded in Berlin, Germany in 1999, and our goal was to bring a psychologically oriented international market research company to the marketplace. We started with a focus on eye tracking and implicit reaction testing. The goal is to help companies get deeper insights beyond surveys. Now today, we've become a global leader in human experience technology, basically about the merging of man and machine. Our headquarters, as I mentioned, is Berlin, Germany, and now we have offices in London, Tokyo, Hong Kong, and we opened up our New York office in 2017. Today, our focus is really on seamlessly integrating psychology and technology, which enables us to really provide valuable insights, as we're going to mention a few times in our talk, the real human experience. A few months ago, the GRIT report came out, and it listed the top 50 innovative market research companies. 8 of the top 10 innovative market research companies listed are using our live in-context ad injection technology. It was a really exciting thing to see. We have a heavy emphasis today on the digital world. All of our solutions are automated and agile. And since COVID, which has been a challenge for a lot of places in the world, our e-com solutions have grown significantly because more and more companies right now, they're realizing they need to understand and optimize their e-com strategies. So, but from a high level, we help companies get valuable answers in 3 main areas: user experience, brand and media experience, and shopper experience.
That's a pretty impressive portfolio of activities. Thanks so much for that. I wanted to ask you a little bit about kind of what kind of company and what kind of services are you providing the companies which are approaching at the moment? So like, who would be your ideal business partners?
Sure. In market research, we're always looking to test in the most realistic environment, which is not always easy. And we talk about human experience a lot because all of our testing is conducted in a natural environment. And for years in the market research world, System 1 and System 2, implicit and explicit research were combined to get actionable insights in market research. Our CEO came up with a brilliant, idea and foundation to research is System 0. System 0 is perception, and this affects everything in market research. How is a stimuli presented? System 0 is critical to get more accurate insights from System 1 and System 2, because really perception is the start of every contact. In the past, respondents were shown different stimuli. Let's say an ad was shown to a respondent. They were asked questions about the ad. And while it is important to know what people say, and it's interesting to say what they say they'll do, we wanted to get closer to real life. We wanted to know, what do people actually do in a natural environment? Because we know what people say they're going to do and what they do are not always the same. So I'm going to focus on social media. In the social media world, about 60% or more of the ad dollars are on social media: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And the way we test is they're shown in a live environment where the respondents don't even know an ad's being tested. They're just given a link. They're going to browse social media site. In the case of YouTube, they're asked to pick a video, and they don't know the pre-roll video is what's being tested. So what do we measure? All behavior of the respondent. For example, how long was the video played on YouTube? Did they skip it? Did they share it? Did they save it? Did they like it? Did they make it full screen? On Facebook, for example, did they turn the sound on? How much time was the ad in screen? How many people saw 25%, 50%, 75, 100% of the ad? Did they click on it? We measure a total of 30 behavioral metrics total, and all in a natural environment, which is how the consumer is going to be exposed to the ad in real life. Testing in this environment is as real as you can get. So after they browse the media site, they're redirected back to the survey, where we get explicit insights and merge it with the behavioral insights. So we get a holistic view of the ad and how consumers behave in the natural environment. Now, this is just one way we help businesses make better decisions, and I focused on this first because so much of the digital world is in the social media site, and people want to optimize their ads and understand which platform delivers the most attention and interest.
Thanks a lot. And I'm guessing that you'll be talking a little bit about this in your presentation during the Insights Festival show. So that will be amazing to be hearing a little bit more details for those who are interested about that. I wanted to ask you as well, kind of during the Insights Festival 2020, kind of what can delegates be learning more in terms of the approach that you're talking about with the System Zero and those types of things?
Sure. And System Zero is critical, but I want to also bring up a large percentage of the people in our company have masters and PhDs in psychology and extensive market research experience. The delegates, what they're going to learn more than anything else is when you partner with iSquare, you're going to build a strong, valuable relationship, a real partnership with world-class people and world-class technology. You're going to get honest, actionable insights based on proven science. And we have some of the brightest minds in market research. Really, it's very special. Our clients are really special to us, and we feel we're very special to our clients also. I mentioned earlier about social media. And as I mentioned, about 60% of online dollars go to YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and so forth. It's very difficult to track by intention of the platforms. So our live ad injection technology delivers insights that they're not going to be able to get anywhere else.
Jeff, thanks so much. Of course, for those of you who are interested in learning more about the company, you can find that out by joining the Insights Festival, and there you will actually have a presentation from Jeff and the others talking a little bit about the services. But Jeff, I was wondering, do you have anything new to announce which somebody who might be unfamiliar with the company or somebody who is familiar with the company might be excited to learn about?
Sure, thanks. That's a great question. As I mentioned on social media, I mentioned some of the platforms. We always are adding wherever the eyeballs are. For example, Twitch, TikTok, Quibi, Youku. And recently we opened a new door to e-commerce with Amazon and Walmart, grocery. Many digital ads are designed to sell more products. That's why they're spending money on advertising. So we decided to open another door and go deeper into the live in context to measure how the ad works when they're going to e-com. And let me just briefly give a highlight. So respondents open up their survey email, either on desktop or mobile. They're going to click on the survey link, answer some basic qualifying questions. Then they're told to go to Facebook, Instagram, and browse as they normally would. And again, they don't know when ads being tested. So they'll browse, and with YouTube, as I mentioned earlier, they'll ask to pick a video. So the pre-roll will be the test ad. After they browse social media, where they're exposed to an ad without knowing, then they're going to be taken to Amazon and asked to purchase a product in that category. So what we're going to, and the second cell will be a control where they'll go through the same experience with no ad. And what we're going to measure is what kind of lift did that ad exposure bring to the purchase? And not just the purchase we're measuring, we're also measuring how much more time is spent on the product that they saw an ad of. And did they click on it for consideration? So we believe this has a potential to be a new currency in measuring ad effectiveness by measuring the effect that it has on e-com. And another last thing I want to bring up is that Amazon is growing, their ad business is growing faster than Facebook and YouTube right now. They're really making a mark, whether it's sponsored products, sponsor brand ads, and display ads. We actually can test those ads in a live environment where, again, the respondent doesn't know an ad's being tested, and then see if that ad affects the purchase. And one last thing, we are creating a programmatic solution, and we're actually looking for partners to help develop that. It's really, really exciting. Very high level. We'll get more when we present and people can contact us. So thank you.
Jeff, thank you so much for joining the Insights Festival show and for sharing with us all the information about your exciting company ventures. I think it's going to be an exciting journey to partner up with iSquare, and looking forward to hearing more from your presentation later in the show.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Insights Festival show brought to you by NetQuest. We are delighted to be joining on the next stop of our tour, which is Latin America. And I am delighted to welcome three amazing researchers working in the Latin American region who are going to be telling us about what is happening exactly in the region, how is COVID-19 impacting that particular region, and what can business leaders, members of the general public, and politicians expect for the upcoming few months. So I'm really delighted to be welcoming three fantastic researchers today. They've been contributing to the Research Eureka for COVID-19 website, where more than 150 research findings are located. And they're going to be telling us a little bit about that particular piece of research, as well as, of course, talking to us about other things which they have uncovered. So we just want to thank on the show, Urpi, Diego, and Santiago. Welcome to the show. I would like to invite each of you to first introduce yourselves, and then we can talk a little bit about the research you've undertaken. Ladies first, Urpi, tell us a little bit about yourself, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kim. I am Urpi from Peru. I have a market research company. Just a few days ago, our company had our 40th anniversary, so it's a company that has been for a long time here in the region. And I am also president of the Peruvian Association of Market Research, and also I am SMR's representative for Peru.
Thank you, Urpi, and welcome to the show. Santiago, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from?
Yes, I'm from Argentina, from Buenos Aires. I also have a market research agency with not so many years of like Urpi's in the market, only with 20 years in the market. I've been the president of the Chamber of Market Research Agencies in Argentina in 2015 for 2 years. I've known Urpi for quite a few years as well, because we shared some common events in the past, and we were part of different associations that involved both of us. And I know Diego by name, and because we also met in different congresses and events of our industry.
Welcome to the show, Santiago. And last but certainly not least, Diego, welcome to the show. Tell us a little about you and where you're from.
Hi, Kim. Well, I'm Uruguayan, but I've been living in Buenos Aires for the last 15 years. And actually, we share with the other presenter speakers the fact that I'm working in a long-time company. We're also celebrating our 20 years this year. This is kids, guys, because we really started very young. We were teenagers when we started, just to understand the reason. I mean, we are young people. No, just kidding. But we've been in business for quite some time. So I'm very happy to be joining these people with so much experience. I have not known Santiago for many. I mean, I just. As he said, we've been in some conferences, and I've read some papers he published in some of the SMR conferences or proposals, where I had the pleasure to be part of the committee. And Urpi, I've known Urpi for, I don't know, maybe 10 years now, or quite some time, or I think more. I was working in another company, so it was before 20 years that we've been in touch when I was working in my earlier company. That's quite some time. So very happy to be here, and find really specializing in medical market research. And regarding COVID, we have run a very large project involving doctors, which we hope to be sharing today.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, all three of you, for the time today. And it's great to have such interconnected expertise as well. So it's fantastic for that. But let's jump right into the meat of this session, and really it's to learn a little bit about what your research is uncovering about the Latin American region. So I was hoping that you might be able to share with the audience a little bit more about what exactly is your research uncovering with regards to how the region is faring because of COVID-19, and how you anticipate things moving forward. But let's talk a little bit first kind of what your recent research is on finding. Urpi, do you want to start us off and tell us a little bit of what's happening in Peru?
Yeah, sure. Oh, probably as in many countries, this health crisis has turned into an economic crisis. This has an important effect in mental health, and that is affecting all behaviors and trends, not only in Peru, but in the region. We have been running studies in Peru, Colombia, Argentina, Chile, and we're finding the same situation, the same trends. Half of the population still can't work, and because of lockdowns and quarantines. Also, 30% of people is living from government aid, and the other 70% of the population has to reinvent themselves because out of work or income threatened. This has turned into anger, frustration, and many people have reinvented and looking for new ways to survive. We are in a survival economy right now, and distrust has grown to the point that there are different opinions whether coronavirus is real or not, and fake news and uncertainty about what is true and what is not also is growing in the region.
It's a really interesting picture of a continent and a region which is really in turmoil. Diego, do you want to maybe react in terms of what Urpi has said? And I believe that you've been conducting quite a lot of research also looking at the health profession and kind of how they weathered the initial storm. And of course, in Latin America, the storm is still continuing, if I understand right.
Right. Well, first we need to realize that this is a particularly sensitive moment in the region. Of course, this is a global thing, while the pandemic has obviously had a worldwide effect. In LATAM, it has been particularly hard. Today, 5 out of the 10 most affected countries in terms of infections are based in Latin America. And if we all add the 11th country, which is Chile, then we can say that the 6 largest countries, the 6 largest populations, and the 6 largest markets in terms of market research are affected within this list of top 10 countries. In LATAM, early lockdowns have been useful to avoid a rapid peak, checking what was happening in Europe. These strict mobility restrictions have compensated in some way the lack of strong healthcare infrastructures and provided governments with critical time to improve their hospitals resources locally. However, and I have to say that we have seen that this was acknowledged by the doctors we have been interviewing during our tracking. They perceive that today the hospital infrastructures are in much better shape than what was the case, let's say in March or April. However, the situation has not yet stabilized, and it's not clear when the peak might be reached in most countries. Even if happening soon, is showing to be a longer process than in other geographies. Furthermore, most countries are maintaining strict restrictions for a long time, so this is likely to result in a deeper economic impact than other geos worldwide. Results have shown that doctors have 2 major concerns. In some way, are the 2 major concerns that everyone of us are sharing, or the populations are sharing, but in some way dramatically incremented. This is fear of infections for themselves and their families as being exposed to patients with COVID-19, and worries about the abrupt fall of patients, or in other words, the economic impact to themselves if they're having a private consultation or how they're working. And this is not just the problem of the impact they're having as everyone, as workers, but also the fact they are seeing less patients, and this is probably having a potential impact in terms of the health of the population, because it's worsening patient conditions, or at least that's the way they're saying, due to lack of controls or late diagnosis. So it's quite a complicated situation from the healthcare point of view, and not just thinking about the pandemic itself, but also about the impact of the restrictions or the response to the pandemic.
And Santiago, I understand that you've also been conducting research kind of covering most of Latin America as well. I mean, in terms of your studies, are you finding echoes in terms of what Urpi and Diego have kind of highlighted in terms of the country being in turmoil, the uncertainty, the concerns about the measures and the success of those measures? Or are you uncovering something a bit different?
Yes, about a month and a half ago, we finished a study that we did together with a network we are part of named Artis. This study was conducted in 11 countries in the world, in countries of Europe like Spain, France, Italy, Germany, Poland, one country of Africa like Nigeria, and some countries of the America in general, from Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Mexico, and the United States. And it's very clear how the different regions were going through different stages at the time in the responses from people, where you could see that in Latin America at the time the crisis was exploding or about to explode in some countries. In Europe, they were going past that stage. So when you ask people their main feeling at the time, you'd get from the European countries answers like calm, hope, and different positive statements. While when you ask the same question in this region, in all the countries, the main word was worry. I mean, we were worried, and we were right to be worried. Also, when you look within the region, each country handled the crisis in a different way. In some countries were more restrictive, and in some countries gave people more freedom to move. So we see different results as well. Like in Brazil, the crisis spread out very quickly. In other countries like Argentina, where the lockdown started early and continued for a long time, it was more controlled, but now it's starting to grow. So I mean, the common denominator is that nobody knows so much about this pandemic. Nobody knows how to deal with this crisis. The governments are doing what they can, what they believe is best, and I don't know. Maybe we will have to wait another year or so to see the results. What was more successful and what was not.
Thanks everyone for your introductory remarks, and I think it gives us a really interesting picture in terms of what's happening in Latin America. I kind of wanted to bring in a question for you all to mull over, which is really kind of, are there, from the research that you're conducting, are there things which you feel are particularly specific themes to Latin America, or specific challenges which a business leader or a civil society leader, or even a political leader should be thinking about as being very specific to that particular region? Or would you say that in general, no, there are some clear themes, but these are themes which you would say are probably cascaded in other regions? Urpi, I don't know if you'd have any kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. Demands are changing. People think that of brands as friends, and friends should be there for good and for bad. People is listening and looking for brands with purpose, brands with soul, brands with that act and react beyond this crisis. So what we find that there is a need to understand and track these changes, to be close to people. There is a redefinition of life, careers, relationships, priorities. It is a turning point that every leader wants to be part of. So it is not about fighting the old, because sometimes, we try to go back to what is normal, or to a situation like of a pre-COVID life. But no, we should building the new. Decisions made that we are making now will impact consumer habits or for the next several years. So consumers are turning to digital. This is maybe this is a trend all over the world, but in Peru, it's or in Latin America, it has been a big issue because there were a lot of gaps and concerns about digital. So it has grown and accelerated all this digital life for all of us. And this has impacted purchase behaviors and reduced contact ways of accessing to products and services. So companies need to redesign shopper journeys for consumers who may be in a different state of mind. So I will, if we have to talk to leaders in the region, that's where I will focus on this new life and new redefined life, this new normal that will still affect, and we need to track it, to be close to people and to change this.
Diego, Santiago, from your side, would you echo kind of what Urpi has just said, or are there things, additional dimensions that you would be adding and building on to her edifice? Diego, would you like to start?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Diego.
Go on, Diego.
I can be pretty much the same as what Urpi is saying in the overall picture. I think we are this idea of how we adapt to this very particularly unusual situation is happening with everyone, and we see the same thing with the doctors. I think many have been frozen and tried to cope on a survival mode, hoping this will end up very soon. But others have looked into adapting, and we're seeing this with the professionals. Think about the situation. They are seeing less patients, less income, higher risk of infection, more pressure of their environments. Think especially about those in the front line. And what we have been able to measure is that this is having an emotional impact on them. And 9 out of 10 doctors were recognizing that the pandemic situation has impacted them emotionally, and particularly those on the front line. The fear of family and personal infection and fatigue were the most significant, but we can add a large number of symptoms like anxiety, difficulty of sleeping, and a number of other symptoms. And the main reaction, the problem is how they react to the situation. The main reaction we have seen is that many doctors have tried to quickly change how they are caring patients and demanding for changes and protocols to be able to continue doing their work. And we're showing an incredibly fast transition to remote ways of caring their patients. In a business that was traditionally 100% face-to-face, which is that seeing a doctor was almost 100% something done in person, we have seen that today around half of the consultation in the region are taking place remotely, including phone, WhatsApp, or even in some cases conferencing platforms. This, of course, is not possible for all kinds of specialists. Let's think about a surgeon or anesthesiology, but it's particularly very well fit for others, such as psychiatrists, in which most of them assume that in the post-pandemic future, the majority of their patients will be cared involve some kind of virtual component. Overall, 44% of the doctors in LATAM believe that they will keep engaged in these remote practices once major restrictions are lifted. So it's in what was Urpi telling about this digital change is not something that's going just to be transitional, but most likely is going to change us very, very profoundly.
Yes, I totally agree with what they were saying. What happens to me is that if I try to see what's going to happen in 1 year's time or so, it's very difficult because we are like in a roller coaster and everything changes on a weekly basis, more or less. At the time we did that study I mentioned before, Argentina was one of the few countries with a positive opinion about the government. Only two countries, Germany at the time, okay? This is 1 month and a half ago. Germany and Argentina were the positive opinions were more than the negative opinions. Now, I could not affirm that the same would happen. And what I was saying before as well, we don't know what strategy is better, and we will not know it until this is over, because we don't know. And I think that the feelings of people change as well in with the same dynamic. And one day we feel more positive, and another day we feel very negative. There are still some trends that I can see that from different study waves of this study we have done is that people valorate more those companies or organizations with that are social responsible. The purpose of a brand becomes more important than the functional attributes of a brand. The trend of working at home, definitely. I mean, in fact, something that happened to us, we were building on top of our office to enlarge the space, and when this started, and now we are deciding, and probably we are not going to do it. We are going to close it. I mean, put a roof and finish the walls, because it was all halfway through the work, because we realized that we are going to be working a lot more from home. So less people are going to go to the office. And I think this is going to happen everywhere. So I agree with what Urpi says, that this is one of the main changes, the digital way of relating between all of us, and of course the impact in market. If industry was a bit slow to adapt, this is going to accelerate the process. I mean, because there's no choice.
And that really paints a very, I guess, very challenging picture for leaders, because on the one hand, there is kind of this inability to essentially plan well in advance. So there's a lot of short-termism. There's a few trends, but not very strong trends, aside from the fact that a brand should probably be more brand activist. I mean, what would be your advice for a business leader or a political leader in this stage in Latin America? What are things that they should be doing to either increase consumer confidence or to increase confidence in government measures? Urpi, are there any advice coming out of Peru?
Yes, I want to clear myself, but there are trends. There are big trends affecting people. We don't know when this is going to be over, or if it is going to be over. So we have to work thinking on today and track it and be there to understand day by day what is going on. I think there are strong trends related to security, related to healthy life. People is concerned because they think that if they eat healthy, they will be strong enough, so they won't get the virus. So there are all sort of new behaviors going on. But nothing is static. Nothing is, we would like to know, okay, this has changed and this will be the future. We don't know what is going to be the future. What we know is that there is an alteration of the public and the private. We post what we do in private and what we used to do in public, now we do it at home. And there is a huge instability of emotions. There is a carousel, a big roller coaster of emotions. People go through different moods during the day. There is a happiness because we are together with the family, but there is also a stress because people don't know if tomorrow they will have enough money to eat. There is frustration, but because people would like to do so many things and they can't do it now. So we have to understand this instability of emotion and what is going on in these different moments of the day, in different situations. So there is a government and many and even companies in this crisis are focusing in the health emergency, in the pandemic, but the governments are not focusing on the economic crisis, on the problem, and also they are not focusing on the mental health. There are no, at least in many countries in Latin America, you won't see these politics or policies related to mental health and how to help people to go through this situation. So if I would focus on one thing that leaders should work on is understand these mental health issues. And as I told before, companies, brands have to be in the good and in the bad moments for people. So these are the bad ones, so the bad moments. So it's time to stay close, to listen and to understand what people is feeling.
And Diego, is that something that you also are seeing through the research that you're undertaking? Because I think Urpi indeed highlights a number of points, and the fact that mental health is being perhaps completely forgotten in all these mass measures is really interesting point, which maybe hasn't been appreciated enough particularly by public policies and public policy makers.
No, indeed, that was actually the prophecy that most doctors share in common. I mean, we put a number of potential future scenarios, and the impact on the health and the mental health of the population was the one that most doctors agree that was something very likely to happen in the medium, short or medium term. I think following what Urpi was saying, our mission here as researchers, the little we can do is try to help that the decision makers are trying to make their own decisions based on evidence. And for instance, in thinking about the politicians, that they are not thinking in terms of political or short-term gain or loss aversion only. That is where we shall be helping and hopefully be called to provide, along with all other kind of researchers, a rational discussion framework. For instance, in the policy to prevent the pandemic, I mean, either to avoid the radicalization, such as blind decisions that can disseminate irresponsibly the virus, or in the contrary, impose strict authoritarian restrictions in behaviors with maybe relatively low impact on the dissemination. So the best way to decide this is to provide evidence so that decision makers can have that information available. And interesting, we're discussing. I was discussing a post that Santiago shared yesterday, where a researcher from Argentina was saying basically that when we're thinking about evidence, we're thinking more in terms of the vaccines and more on the medical side. But we have to think that evidence is also what's happening with the populations in terms of our abilities or our tools from the social sciences and the research sciences to be able to understand what's happening. That's also part of the evidence discussions. And the same is valid for businesses. They need to use evidence to actively and intelligently go with the challenges rather than freeze and wait, which of course can become a disastrous strategy, especially in LATAM with time extension, of the current restrictions. The good news is that we as an industry are naturally trained and focused in collecting evidence and giving insight based on the understanding even the naked truth, even when those truths may not be nice to hear. So I think we can help on that side.
Mm. It's really important indeed, as we see in many regions, there's increasing opposition to the government measures, especially if they're going to be keep on going longer term and longer term. That indeed there is that fatigue, the confinement fatigue almost. Santiago, I mean, you're the one who seems to have shared some interesting bits of information. Anything that you would like to add to this particular round?
No, I mean, I think there is going to be polarization. I can see that people for and people against. This is politically is. I mean, it's very difficult for any government to stay stable in this situation because of what Diego was saying before, that we tend to deny the situation. I mean, it's so overwhelming that we don't want to face the situation and we need to blame somebody. And of course, the first ones to blame are the governments, the national governments and the state governments. And then on the other hand, who support that. And I think that is going to bring tension all over the world. And we can see that with people. I mean, I thought that was only happening in Argentina. Argentina has been quite polarized in the last many years, at least 10. And I thought, and sometimes is very violent, aggressive. And I thought this was something just of Argentina. But you can see images like that all over the world. Yesterday I was seeing a fight of people in Holland. I think it was in Amsterdam. People who were having a drink somewhere with others, facing them and saying, "No, you can't do this." And they started throwing tables and chairs over each other. You can see the concentration in Berlin of people not wanting to use the masks. You see people saying that the virus doesn't exist. So I think there is no way that we can go through this crisis without tension, social tension. There is going to be social tension everywhere. And we have a social that doesn't help. I mean, there is poverty in this part of the world. In some countries, the poverty is 50% or even more. Those people live in conditions that it's very difficult for them to be locked out. They need to go out because they share their house with many other people, and so they have no chance of staying home so many days and weeks and months, and that is going to bring tension. On the other hand, we are now working, helping, because one of the characteristics of this moment is that we all have to adapt, and we have to adapt as well. We are now working in a project helping with the test of one of the vaccines in Argentina, because after all, besides the medical facts, testing a vaccine is an operational task as well. You need to recruit people, volunteers who go and apply the vaccine. And we are working on that, and it's amazing how people, take it at heart. They feel that by going and testing the vaccine, they are helping the humanity and they are helping the country. And some of them say, I've been in the war in the 80s, and now the world is going something like a war again, and I want to be there again. So my way is here to win. think attributes like solidarity, reevaluation of the scientific work and the health work are going to be on top of the agenda, I think. And for any organization needs to be in touch with that and needs to communicate that because for people is becoming something very important.
And I think it's a nice way to conclude the session. Unfortunately, time is running away from us, but I still wanted to offer both to Diego and to Urpi also some final words to kind of talk to us a little bit about the kind of opinion on what Santiago was highlighting, the specificities of the region, but also the reaction, for example, the patriotic reaction to getting tested and to participating in a vaccine test. Are you finding other kind of emerging themes that are very specific to Latin America, you would say? And what would be your future outlook for the region? Urpi, do you want to set us off?
Yes, thank you. The outlook for the moment is not positive for the region. So far, we can anticipate a huge economic crisis, which is increasing, will increase poverty and social unrest in the region. But we have to look it in another way. We have to understand how the population behaves and what is people willing to do. Our region has a resilient population capable of overcoming obstacles. What we have seen so far is that people reinventing themselves, changing their activities, their professions. Many people is studying new skills and learning how to adapt to this new situation. So if I have to point out something that will be important and key in this region is that this resilient population that will be strong. That will be a strong force that will help us to go through this economic crisis and these all negative outcomes of this crisis, of this health crisis. And for that, what we have to do is to stay close, as I already said, because we need to track what is going on and how this will evolve. We don't know for sure what will happen, but we know that this is a turning point that will change the future of the region, and maybe will turn into something good for all of us. But we have to be there to anticipate, to measure, to be in every part of this process, because we don't have to think that, okay, we have to wait for this to end so we study what will happen. No, this is a process that is alive and is changing at every minute. So what will go on in the region, it's hard to anticipate, but it's important to understand it at every point. But because what is going on today will be maybe different tomorrow. So to be constantly listening to people is key for this moment.
And Diego, the final word to you. Anything you want to add to what Santiago and what Urpi have been saying?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, thinking about the future outlook for Latin America, I have to say that even when I'm pessimistic for the short term, I'm moderately optimistic in the long run. In the short term, it looks, of course, extremely complicated in several fronts, including society, health, economy, poverty. as Santiago was pointing out, the quality of the democracy could eventually be on risk, which so far has not has been able to keep going as it was, with some difficulties, but of course there's some risk in that front too. But we have seen over time the ability of the region to rebound from its ashes, and and some of the things that Santiago was telling, like this solidarity thing, that it's kind of booming, gives us some room for some hope too. And regarding market research, I think there is an interesting paradox that we're seeing budgets that are obviously shrinking. We see that jobs tend to be smaller than what they used to be in the past. But at the same time, there's a deeper need for understanding. So I think the natural resolution of this paradox of smaller budgets but larger need of understanding is that in the near future we're going to be seeing the activity rebounding significantly. That's what I would expect for our specific work. And I think finally something relevant to know for our industry is that in this gigantic experiment that we are all in, working from home has performed remarkably well. Something that it's much better than what we all might have expected before. So I think that this is again something that will keep in the future, and we might be working from home much more than what we were imagining before this. So I just, if this is the closing words, I want to thank Kim and everyone for this special time in the conference.
Thank you, Diego. Thank you, Urpi. Thank you, Santiago, indeed, for your time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I hope that you found this journey into the Latin American region interesting. Thank you so much for watching. As you may be aware, we are running the State of the World according to insights for all the regions of the world, including a global overlook. So please do tune in to Facebook and to YouTube, where more of these episodes will be showing. If you found the insights that they've been sharing interesting, do attend the Insights Festival taking place from the 14th to the 17th of September. You can still register online and attend many of the events where many insights makers like Diego, like Urpi, like Santiago are also sharing their insights about the state of the world, about the impact of COVID-19 and how we prepare for a post-COVID-19 world. So I thank you so much for your attention. Thank you again, Urpi, Santiago, Diego, for joining the show. It was amazing to be with you. And thank you for this insight and glimpse into how the Latin American region is faring and preparing for its future. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome back to the Insights Festival show. I hope that you've enjoyed the wrap up, and I hope that you had an amazing day 2. Finn, what an amazing day 2 it was. I think it gave us all of what we promised.
I tell you, I was blown away from the US about how the market is recovering and dealing with the post, well, during COVID, I guess. There's nothing post about it, but the during COVID challenges. And of course, then we had the great presentations from Research Got Talent. We've had, what else? We had a huge bunch of tech.
Yeah.
So amazing amounts of tech. There was the diversity and inclusion stuff. There was the whole schizophrenia thing from Turkey, which again, I was just blown away by. We've had politics. I mean, wow, what a cocktail. It was just all day long, right?
Yeah.
It didn't stop coming.
It was absolutely incredible. And I also had a chance to go to the Insights Festival show. So I stopped by in Europe. It was quite an amazing session there with regards to, just meeting kind of the European Data Protection Board. That was quite an impressive meeting. I certainly learned quite a lot about what Juliana was planning. So I know what I'm going to be working on for the next few
It was great to get her,
months.
by the way. That was a great coup. So that was a super interview.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, I mean, just stopping by Latin America as well, which was, it's always great to stop by our Latin American friends. I believe that they're organizing still some stuff after we're done with this particular wrap-up, actually.
Well, I think they're clearly kind of challenging us. Like, we're doing it. We're here for 16 hours and they want us to stay another 2 to fix up that one as well. So who knows? Who knows?
And also, I think what was interesting today in particular was how many sessions the Insights Committee decided to organize around the topic of diversity and inclusion. And I think certainly on the show, I think the passion came through the researchers that really wanted to do something in support of inclusivity, but also a number of workshops organized by council members and by the community as well on the topic. And it's really amazing. Agreed.
No, that was, I have to say, that was probably the most heartwarming element of the day. There was just so much input. It was great.
And let's not forget, of course, Research Got Talent, which I think was also one of the highlights of the day. So, I mean, Bianca and Razvan, I think, stole the show. And I think but the people who really stole the show, of course, the young researchers.
Without a doubt. They were great. And I have to say, don't forget to vote, by the way. Are we still running the vote for them? I think we are.
Maybe.
Anyway, they were great presentations. And I'm looking forward to hearing a whole lot more from them over the days and weeks and months to come.
And I'm told that you get the honor of telling who wins. Is it tomorrow already? Oh.
Yeah, so all bribes welcome. Any small brown envelopes filled with cash. I'm very happy to kind of give a sneak preview. Just kidding. We'll give a sneak preview of that maybe tomorrow.
And I understand that the Loud Shirt contest is alive and kicking.
Loud Shirt contest is still alive and kicking. Thanks to all the presenters today who kind of followed up and were indeed wearing warm, loud, summery, happy shirts. So let's hope that trend continues tomorrow too.
Looking forward to that. Well, I think it's been an amazing second day. I hope that you guys who are still awake, don't forget there's the LATAM Meet and Gats are organized by our Mexican friends. The Brazilians are organizing even later. So It's the battle of who can organize it the latest for Europeans. And a big challenge for Europeans. Whoever can stay up for all of these sessions, let us know. Send us a message on Twitter, and maybe we can think of something to reward you for your commitment to the community.
Absolutely. It's an early start. If you're in Europe or the US, it's an early start tomorrow. We've another great day, mind you, in terms of the program. It's absolutely packed with stuff on how research inspires and helps to innovate, etc., etc. We'll talk to you a little bit more about that in the morning. We won't give it all away now. We do need to get some, couple of hours of shut-eye because we're up very early tomorrow to do that opening session. So don't go away and make sure you join us for tomorrow.
Perfect. So enjoy the rest of the day for those of you who are staying up, and see you tomorrow morning, where we're going to be talking a little bit about what day 3 promises to have.
Absolutely. And once again, big thanks to Kim for doing all the hosting. Big thanks to Vincent, who's again the maestro behind the scenes that you don't see. We'll turn the camera around on the last day so that you can see him, and hopefully he'll be wearing a loud shirt too. So anyway, thanks to those guys. Thanks to you for being with us, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Have a good one. And again, Networks, thank you for making all this possible.
Cool.